What's your emergency?
I've been shot.
Who shot you?
I'm sorry?
Who shot you?
Andy Steele.
Where's Andy Steele at now?
I don't know. I think he shot himself.
Dane County Deputy Sheriff Andy Steele was diagnosed with ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease. He was only 39 years old and was forced to retire. Feeling despondent due to his diagnosis and aware that he didn't have long left to live, Andy planned one last party weekend with his wife Ashlee and her sister Kacee. However, the event turned tragic when he killed both women and attempted suicide. Shockingly, Andy claimed he wasn't responsible for the murders, stating that his ALS made him do it. But can ALS really be blamed? Or was Andy fully in control of his actions, thus making him guilty of double homicide? Let's get into it. Ashlee Kristen Steele, a native of Laguna Hills, California, was born on January 24, 1975. As the eldest of 4 children, she had a lot of responsibility from a young age. Her life took an exciting turn when she met a boy named Andrew Steele. Their love story began at the tender age of 12, and despite the challenges of growing up, the pair held on to their connection. When high school came to an end, Ashlee's family decided to pack up and move to Minnesota. But despite the distance, the bond between Ashlee and Andy remained strong. They both set their sights on the University of Wisconsin in Madison, determined to turn their shared dreams into reality. In 1998, Ashlee proudly graduated with a bachelor's degree in child and family studies. Love blossomed further as the two sweethearts exchanged vows, starting a new chapter as Mr. and Mrs. Steele. Andy found his calling at the Dane County Sheriff's Office, while Ashlee carved out her career path in the world of finance. Years later, her passion for children led her to switch careers, and she became a beloved preschool teacher at Christ Memorial Lutheran Preschool in Fitchburg. The couple's love story was further enriched with the arrival of their 2 children, Jack and Rachel. As the calendar flipped to 2014, Andy began to experience a strange twitching in his arms. It was subtle at first, but as the weeks passed, his speech became impaired with slurring and difficulty articulating his words. The twitching intensified, and eating became a challenge, as chewing turned into a struggle. On a day that would forever be etched in the memories of all his loved ones, June 4, 2014, Andy, at the age of 39, received a diagnosis that would forever change his life. He was diagnosed with ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease. Most individuals diagnosed with ALS typically face a life expectancy of 2 to 5 years. The impact of this devastating news rippled through every aspect of Andy's world. Unable to carry out his duties as a sheriff's deputy, a role he had embraced with dedication, Andy was left with no choice but to retire. The abrupt loss of income added financial strain to the emotional burden already shouldered by the Steele family. Determined to face the challenges posed by ALS head-on, Andy's family rallied together, launching the Tough as Steele, Taking Down ALS campaign. Their mission was clear: raise funds to cover the mounting expenses of specialized medical equipment and other essential needs that strained the family's financial resources. The response from friends, colleagues, and a compassionate community was nothing short of remarkable. The campaign drew in hundreds of donations from generous hearts. Ashlee's Facebook page contained a series of heartfelt videos that captured the solidarity of law enforcement colleagues and friends taking the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge in Andy's honor. Overwhelmed by the outpouring of support, Andy expressed his gratitude.
I never would have expected the type of reaching out that people have done, people that have donated, people that I don't even know very well, I haven't seen or talked to in years.
Ashlee took on the role of team captain and funds manager for their campaign. She kept supporters updated about Andy's condition on the fundraising website. Ashlee was more than just a wife to Andy. She was described as the love of his life on the site. Their bond was strong, having weathered life's ups and downs together for 26 years. Their story was a testament to their love and resilience in the face of adversity. Upon receiving his diagnosis, Andy's doctor suggested he make a bucket list, a collection of experiences he wanted to have in the time he had left. One memory stood out from the rest: his high school days. Back then, Andy and his friends would take the stage at school talent shows, impersonating the legendary rock band Guns N' Roses. Their performances were always a crowd favorite, filling the room with energy and applause. With the echoes of cheers still ringing in his ears, Andy knew what he wanted to include on his bucket list. He yearned to relive those thrilling moments on stage, to feel the rush of the spotlight one last time with his buddies. On the evening of August 16, 2014, Andy's friends had organized a concert, a tribute to their high school days and a testament to their enduring friendship. As the lights dimmed, the opening chords of Welcome to the Jungle filled the air, and Andy, channeling his inner Axl Rose, took center stage. The crowd, over 300 strong, erupted into cheers as the music washed over them. Watching Andy on stage with a huge smile on his face brought tears to my eyes, Ashlee wrote on the fundraising site. Friends and family came from all over the United States to share this incredible night with us. The event was so significant that it even caught the attention of the Saginaw News. That night, under the spotlight, Andy wasn't just a dying man battling ALS. He was a rock star, living his dream, surrounded by the love and support of his friends and family. Fresh from the exhilaration of the Guns N' Roses show, Andy was ready to tick off the second item on his bucket list. He yearned for one last party with the two most important women in his life, his wife Ashlee and her sister Kacee. So he extended an invitation to Kacee for a party weekend, just 1 week after the concert. Kacee had just gotten married 4 weeks prior to Mark Tollefsbol. Mark thought Andy's request was a strange one, but because of Andy's illness, he didn't object to Kacee going for the weekend, despite the fact that Andy only invited Kacee and not him as well. So on Friday, August 22nd, Kacee went over to Andy and Ashlee's home for what she thought was going to be a fun-filled weekend. However, the events that followed would unravel in a way no one could have possibly predicted. On that Friday afternoon of August 22nd, at approximately 1 p.m., Kacee made a frantic call to 911.
Tell me exactly what happened there.
I've been shot.
Who shot you, Kacee?
I'm sorry?
Who shot you?
Andy Steele.
Where's Andy Steele at now?
I don't know. I think he shot himself.
Officers were immediately dispatched to the scene. The officers made their way inside through a basement door where they were met with a sight that would haunt them. Kacee, drenched in blood, gasping out the words, "I am dying, I am dying." One officer, trying to piece together what had happened, asked, "Who shot you?" With what little strength she had left, Kacee managed to utter the words, "My brother-in-law." Acting quickly, 2 officers carried her out of the smoke-filled house, and she was immediately rushed to hospital. The weekend of celebration had turned into a nightmare, the full extent of which was yet to unfold. Police established a perimeter around the house, as a suspect had not yet been located. They were unsure whether the suspect was outside or inside the house, so they geared up heavily and waited for the tactical team to arrive. Once they arrived, they surrounded the area to search for the suspect. They went inside the house where a chilling scene awaited them. In the master bedroom, they found Ashlee Steele, lifeless, lying on her back on the bed. She had a gunshot wound to her head and a black zip tie around her neck. A pillow on her chest bore a hole with burn marks around the edges, likely from a muzzle blast. Despite the officers' valiant efforts, they arrived too late, and Ashlee had already passed away. The tactical team's search led them to a laundry room on the main level of the house. Andy had ignited a portable grill filled with charcoal, filling the room with a deadly haze. A gun lay nearby, and one of the detectives acted swiftly, securing the weapon away from Andy's reach. Despite his weakened state, Andy resisted the officers, but was quickly subdued and arrested. During the 911 call, Kacee had mentioned that Andy had possibly shot himself, hinting at a second gunshot she had heard. However, Lieutenant Todd Stetzer clarified that while Andy's injuries were consistent with a suicide attempt, they weren't from a gunshot. Andy had tried to end his life by lighting a charcoal grill in a closed room. Charcoal burning can be a method of suicide if an individual inhales lethal amounts of carbon monoxide. Receipts and surveillance video from a Madison store showed Andy purchasing 2 8-pound bags of charcoal and lighter fluid just hours before the tragic incident. Tragically, Kacee's injuries were too severe, and she was pronounced dead shortly after arriving at the hospital. She left behind 4 young children from her first marriage. Her recent husband, Mark Tollefsbol, was left heartbroken, having lost his wife less than a month after their wedding. Meanwhile, Andy was taken to a hospital for treatment. He spent a few days in hospital recovering. His injuries, while self-inflicted, were not life-threatening. Exactly 1 week later, following his discharge from the hospital, Andy found himself on the other side of the law. He was arrested and faced 2 counts of first-degree intentional homicide. His initial court appearance took place that same Friday afternoon. From the confines of the Rock County Jail, Andy appeared before the court, not in person, but via video link. The once beloved sheriff's deputy was now a suspect in a case that had shaken the community to its core. The Dane County judge set bail at $1 million and told Andy he could not have any contact with his children. On September 11, 2014, Andy faced the courtroom, where the prosecution unfolded a chilling narrative, accusing him of meticulously planning the murders of his wife Ashlee and her sister Kacee. According to court documents, a note found on Andy's phone detailed a sinister plan, outlining various methods of homicide, painting a picture of premeditation. The prosecution argued that Andy had been insistent on Kacee, his sister-in-law, visiting their home without her husband and children. Adding to the mounting evidence, Andy had signed his and Ashlee's wills within 36 hours of the tragic events. Family members communicated to authorities that Andy had shared unsettling thoughts about his wife potentially being absent in the future to care for their 2 children. As the evidence stacked up, the court responded by raising Andy's bail to a staggering $2 million. A trial date was later set for April 13, 2015. On February 27, 2015, Andy, whose condition had worsened, was wheeled into the courtroom for a pre-trial conference. He pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity to the charges of killing his wife, Ashlee Steele, and his sister-in-law, Kacee Tollefsbol. His defense argued that his disease had caused poor impulse control and hindered his ability to obey the law. However, as the trial date drew closer, Andy made a significant change in his plea. On March 27, 2015, just 2 weeks before the trial began, Andy shifted from pleading not guilty by reason of insanity or mental defect to declaring himself guilty but not responsible for the killings. This shift marked a critical moment, with Andy acknowledging his guilt of committing the murders but claiming that because of his ALS, he was not mentally responsible for the crimes. Andy's attorney had indicated that ALS will play a pivotal role in his insanity defense, marking unexplored territory from a legal perspective. It's important to note here that Andy's lawyers have to prove that because of his ALS, he didn't know that what he was doing was wrong, or that his ALS made him kill Ashlee and Kacee. Unlike most other cases with this plea, Andy's case is unique. It doesn't involve a psychiatric condition in the typical sense, but rather ALS, which is a degenerative neurological disorder. This disorder doesn't typically hinder your ability to know right from wrong. It also doesn't typically cause people to commit murder. While the responsibility in most criminal cases usually lies with the prosecution to build and prove a case, in Andy's case, it rests on the defense to convince the jury that he is not responsible for the murders due to his mental state. Also, the jury is not required to make a unanimous decision. The case requires 10 out of 12 jurors to agree. Professor Stephen J. Morse, a widely recognized expert on insanity pleas and a professor in law, psychology, and psychiatry, says that ALS falls outside the conventional parameters of an insanity defense.
ALS is not a psychiatric disorder itself. It's not a mental abnormality per se. And in most cases, it does not produce a major mental abnormality. If, as a practical matter, a defendant wants to succeed with an insanity defense, the defendant is going to have been typically out of touch with reality, psychotic. And I know of no research literature that suggests that ALS produces psychotic states of mind.
On April 13, 2015, the trial finally started. Over the course of approximately 2 weeks, a series of compelling arguments and testimonies were presented to the court. The defense team took center stage, meticulously detailing Andy's battle with ALS. Their goal was to convince the jury that Andy was not responsible for his actions, arguing that his deteriorating mental state, a result of his disease, had driven him to commit the tragic acts. To bolster their case, they called upon a host of witnesses, friends who knew Andy personally, and doctors who could provide professional insights into his condition took the stand. Their testimonies painted a picture of a man grappling with a debilitating disease. The defense's task was not easy. They needed to sway at least 10 of the 12 jurors to believe that it was Andy's battle with ALS, not a premeditated intent, that led to the fatal shootings of his wife and sister-in-law. The trial was a high-stakes battle of legal and medical interpretations, with Andy's fate hanging in the balance. The trial saw a parade of witnesses, each expressing their devastation, surprise, and shock. They painted a picture of the Steeles as a typical family, making the events even more bewildering. Friends did admit that Andy seemed to have sunk into depression after his ALS diagnosis and was drinking excessively. Andy himself claimed to have no memory of the killings, a blackout attributed to his condition. The defense team seized on this, arguing that scientific evidence would prove that Andy's actions were a result of his deteriorating mental state due to ALS, not a conscious decision. The prosecution, however, disagreed. They questioned all the witnesses about Andy's memory capabilities prior to the day of the murders. The unanimous response was that Andy had shown no signs of memory issues before that fateful day. From August 2014, the police had maintained that the homicides were premeditated, the claim supported by a note discovered on Andy's iPhone. This note, which was presented to the jury, outlined a supposed three-way relationship between Andy and the victims, and even mentioned a suicide pact. Dr. Doug Tucker, testifying for the defense, argued that this note was evidence of Andy's delusional state at the time of the homicides. He suggested that Andy had fabricated the entire scenario in his mind. The note, created on August 21st, the day before the tragic events, and last edited on the morning of August 22nd at 6 a.m., became a crucial piece of evidence in this complex trial. The defense used it to argue that Andy's actions were driven by his deteriorating mental state due to ALS, rather than a premeditated intent to kill. The courtroom now faced the challenging task of deciphering whether the note was a manifestation of premeditation or, as the defense argued, evidence of Andy's distorted mental state. Haley Meisterling, the sister of Ashlee and Kacee, took the stand. She shared with the jurors a disturbing account of Andy's behavior on a family trip after his ALS diagnosis. Haley recounted instances where Andy had intruded on her privacy, entering the room while she was changing into her swimsuit.
He knew I was getting changed, and he came into the room knowing I was getting changed.
And that
into
was,
my swimsuit.
That struck you as inappropriate?
Again, because he was intoxicated.
In fact, did that happen more than once on the trip?
Yes, another time I was in their room and he just started taking his pants off.
The court also heard from a neurologist, Dr. Paul Barkhouse. His testimony aimed to explore any potential links between ALS and violent tendencies. When questioned by the prosecutor about whether any ALS patients were known to commit homicides or violent acts, this was his response.
Are any of them committing homicides?
Not to my knowledge.
Are any of them committing any violent acts to your knowledge?
No, again, it's more kind of bumbling things.
In addition to these testimonies, the jury was presented with substantial physical evidence, including over 24 photographs from the crime scene. The trial saw a number of doctors take the stand to testify for the prosecution. The defense, on the other hand, put forth a controversial claim that this was a case of kinky sex gone wrong. Andy claimed he tied his wife up with zip ties and the one around her neck got too tight. Then he said Kacee came in the room but he doesn't remember what happened after that.
It's been their practice to have some type of bondage, sexual activity. He said that he put a zip tie around her neck, and I asked what happened next, and he said it just cinched.
Did he say whether or not his wife said anything?
She said, cut it off, cut it off.
What happened then?
He said that Kacee kicked in the door to the master bedroom, and then he couldn't remember anything else.
The prosecution pointed out several inconsistencies in Andy's account. Andy had stated that his wife had removed her sundress before he tied her up, but crime scene photos showed her dress bunched around her thighs. Andy also mentioned that they had initially used handcuffs, but switched to zip ties due to the noise the handcuffs made. The prosecution questioned this claim, arguing that if Andy had engaged in such sexual activities before, he would have been aware of the noise produced by metal handcuffs. The defense argued that Andy, grappling with the debilitating effects of ALS, was not aware of his actions. However, the prosecution contended that Andy, cognizant of his impending death due to ALS, did not want to face death alone, so he meticulously planned and executed the murders of Ashlee and Kacee. Ashlee's brother Brad Putnam even claimed that he remembers hearing Andy saying, "When I go, we all go."
Everybody was sitting around talking, numerous conversations, and I remember hearing Andy say, "When I go, we all go."
This chilling statement, if true, provided a haunting glimpse into Andy's mindset and potentially supported the prosecution's theory of a calculated and intentional act. On April 23, 2015, after 2 weeks of intense deliberations and testimonies, the jury reached a verdict. They found Andrew Steele not legally responsible for the killing of his wife Ashlee Steele and sister-in-law Kacee Tollefsbol. This verdict sent shockwaves through the courtroom. The jury concluded that Andrew Steele, at the time of the homicides, lacked the mental capacity due to a mental disease or defect. In light of this verdict, the judge made the decision to commit Andy to the State Department of Health Services for life. This outcome reflected a recognition that Andy's mental state at the time of the homicides played a pivotal role in the tragic events, leading to a verdict that spared him from traditional criminal culpability and instead directed him to a mental health institution. He was later committed to the Mendota Mental Health Institute in Madison. Understandably, Ashlee and Kacee's family members were devastated by the verdict and felt that Andy should have been held responsible for the murders and should have been sent to prison, not a mental institution, especially considering all the evidence that was presented by the prosecution. They felt that as long as Andy was not in prison, they would never feel safe. Andy was to be kept at the Mendota Mental Health Institute until his health deteriorates to such a degree that he is no longer capable of harming anyone. Only then could he be released. That wouldn't take long because just 7 months later, on November 23, 2015, a petition for Andy's conditional release was filed in Dane County Court. Judge Nicholas McNamara said he needed to take some time to decide whether Andy should be released. The court heard from 2 different expert witnesses, both doctors. The 2 both said Andy poses no serious risk to himself or others. Doctors said they considered his current mental and physical health when deciding. He's been tube-fed, which needs to be managed by nursing or nursing support. He needs support for toileting. He needs support for any kind of independent movement, expert witness Dr. Burr Eichelman said. He further elaborated on the severity of Andy's condition and stated that the disease is progressing at such a rate that he may soon have to opt for artificial ventilation support to keep him breathing. The Putnam family also made a statement. Brad Putnam, the brother of the 2 victims, and his wife Rochelle, took in Ashlee and Andy's children, and they feel he still posed a risk.
Our entire family is continuing to deal with the pain and loss of Ashlee and Kacee. While we are trying our best to heal and move forward through our grief, we are still very raw in many ways. The idea of Andy being released into the general public scares me to death. I simply do not trust him. Ashlee and Kacee trusted him, and he took their lives.
But after a lengthy statement following summary arguments, Judge Nicholas McNamara said he needs more time, adding this decision is more of a process, and he wants to get it right. The wait ended on Friday, March 4, 2016, when Judge McNamara made his ruling. He ruled that Andy was to be released from the mental health facility. Experts testified that due to the progression of Andy's ALS, he would not have the physical ability to harm himself or others. Judge McNamara described Andy as a man with a dangerous mind, trapped in a powerless, paralytic body, ravaged by an irreversible and unrelenting disease. Andy was then released from the Mendota Mental Health Institute, but just 1 year later, Andy's condition took a turn for the worse, and he was admitted to hospital. A few days later, on March 7, 2017, Andrew Steele lost his battle with ALS and passed away. As we draw the curtains on this tragic case, we are left with a profound sense of loss and a stark reminder of just how fragile life is. For their relatives, the untimely demise of sisters Ashlee and Kacee is a wound that time may never fully heal. Despite nearly a decade passing since their departure, the void left by their absence still resonates in the hearts of those who loved them. Let us not remember them for the way they died, but rather for the way they embraced life. Ashlee was a phenomenal person, a loyal friend you could always count on. As a cherished teacher at Christ Memorial Preschool, she radiated boundless love for the little ones in her care, extending that warmth to the many nieces and nephews who were fortunate to call her aunt. Ashlee's commitment to education was surpassed only by her fierce devotion as a mother to her beloved son and daughter. She faced challenges head-on, her confident determination a testament to her inner strength. Ashlee was beautiful, not just in appearance, but in spirit and character. Kacee was an adoring, joyful mother to her 2 daughters and 2 sons. She was empathetic and the first to offer kindness to anyone in need, and at the same time was full of fun and playfulness. Just a few minutes with Kacee were enough for anyone to understand that her outer loveliness was matched by a beautiful, pure heart. As we bring this story to a close, our thoughts go out to all who knew and loved Ashlee and Kacee, especially their children. May God bless you all, and may Ashlee and Kacee's souls rest in eternal peace.